This is the overview of the webinar. We're going to look at economic development strategies, how to identify them, look at the economics behind formulating strategies. We'll examine some sample strategies and then look at how to measure outcomes. And those are all those technical things that we need to pay attention to. Asset-based economic development strategies really have been stimulated. This conversation across the country has been stimulated by the National Main Street Center's refresh. And they've coined the term community transformation strategies. And I'm finding it really healthy and exciting times for our New Mexico Main Street communities, just like communities across the country are finding it exciting to be more articulate about their strategies. And it's coming at a good time, really not earth-shattering changes to our work, but really helping us to focus on how we do our work, how we become more strategic at lining up our actions. And I recognize from working with communities throughout New Mexico that people are working harder, lots and lots of staff time, lots and lots of volunteer time, and we're working smarter, and one of the ways we can continue to work smarter is by being more strategic in forming our strategies. So transformation strategies transform the Main Street District from an existing state to an evolved one. Those transformation strategies convey a clear sense of priority and direction to your four-point work. They help you communicate with your partners that Main Street is an economic development entity. The more that you can articulate what you're up to, your mission and vision, goals and objectives, the more that you can articulate that using economic development terms, the more you can communicate that you are a sound, comprehensive economic development program. And asset-based economic development strategies are established through the organization's community visioning and action planning processes. So the National Main Street Center has provided us with this graphic to help us think about how this works. Community transformation strategies are economic development strategies that cut across all 4 points of Main Street: design, organization, promotion, and economic vitality. And those guiding strategies, you might have 2 or 3, usually 3, to guide all of your work. The circles up at the top of those 4-point bars sort of represent the leadership and organization and tracking and monitoring and board oversight and committee or team captain oversight of the work in each of those 4 points, and always looking towards the strategies and linking them to the strategies to make sure that it's all connected. And then, of course, your staff and your board and your team captains, committee chairs are looking at how do those activities and responsibilities and the resources that we're allocating to them line up to produce results, and how do we measure those outcomes with data and information to track our outcomes and performance of our strategies, how well we're delivering, how much we are transforming our community. So you might be wondering, how do we come up with strategies? And here are some thoughts that we'll offer. You know, the textbook way is to hold community visioning workshop to look at all of the ideas and objectives and vision and possibilities of the Main Street program. So getting that community input is a really good place to start. And lots of our Main Street programs do this on a fairly regular basis. Sometimes they're working with us in order to produce those community-based action plans for their organization. You can do it in your annual strategic action planning. One year you might have a big workshop, a community visioning session. Another year you might have a drop-in open house to get input. Maybe another year you could get away with an online survey monkey asking members of the community to give you some guidance. I think the leadership of your Main Street organization plays that by ear, and evaluates each year what sort of community input you want. It might be that you need to be out on the street getting to know all of the business owners because you haven't been doing that as much as you want to, and so maybe you emphasize business visitations one year as a critical way of gathering community input. It might come in the form of your, as part of your comprehensive district master planning process. When you're doing a Main Street district master plan, you'll have community visioning exercises and meetings that accompany that master plan formation, that whole process. I think that we should always be watching out to be grooming our economic development strategies organically, incrementally, holistically, and experimentally. And by that, I mean that the organization should jump in. Your board president should jump in and start articulating strategies. Your committees, each of your 4-point leaders should be articulating what are the strategies that the organization is working on. So I think there's never a bad time to start articulating your strategies. It's not a linear process, even though, you know, we break the world down into linear processes, such as starting with a community visioning workshop to direct your transformation strategies that you come up with. It takes, but it's more of a circular one. So my advice is for the organization's leadership, meaning its paid staff as well as its board members and its team captains, committee chairs, to jump in and start articulating the strategies right now. And if you find yourself hesitant to articulating a strategy, look behind some of the economics of most economic development strategies. So let's do that right now. And if we think about what is economics, good old, you know, college economics 1 or 101, the textbook starts with supply and demand. And it's not more complicated than that. So we look at the economics of our community, the economics of our Main Street district, and look at supply and demand. And there are 2 classifications of economic development strategies. When I examine economic development strategies of our Main Street programs across New Mexico, and I look at examples from other places in the country, I see them falling into 2 classifications. So if you put your economist hat on and try to examine what are the 2 main categories of economic development strategies, this is what you get. You get, firstly, import substitution, which means reducing leakage out of your community. So one set of strategies revolves around stopping that flow of leakage by capturing the local demand dollars that are generated in your community by providing for local folks' needs for goods and services, and to provide more opportunities so that they don't need to cross out of their trade area around your district in order to meet their needs. Which boils down to selling more to the local residents. And then the second set of or second classification for economic development strategies falls into the category of export. So export might be you have a strong local arts community and they manufacture a lot of different arts and crafts, and those get exported out of the community either through the internet or through shipping out the back door to other stores and retail outlets across the region or across the country or even out across the world, like happened out of our some of our New Mexico Main Street communities. And it also means every time you sell to a visitor who lives outside of your trade area, in fact, exporting something from your community. So export is selling goods and services to people who live outside of your trade area. So not that we want to be stale or sterile about the way we articulate our economic development strategies. One possible way of getting to the bottom of them and starting to grow your economic development strategies from scratch is to look at that they simply fall into these 2 categories. So that might help your board and your organization think about your economic development strategies if you look at these two classifications. So this was an example of Carlsbad's trade area. We have dollars inside the community that we're trying to keep inside the community, and we have dollars from outside of the community that we're trying to bring into the community. Another way of looking at import substitution and exporting. So let's take a look at a sample economic development strategy, and here is one that's just been made up, that I made up, based a little bit on some recent visits to businesses in grants. And the strategy is an import substitution strategy. It's capture more local consumer dollars by helping existing businesses to better serve local residents. And we know that a lot of our MainStreet programs work on this intensively and line up a lot of their MainStreet 4-point work to follow through on that. So here's an example then of carrying out how our work in each of the 4 points supports that bigger picture community transformation strategy of capturing more local consumer dollars by helping existing businesses to better serve local residents. And some of the outcomes that we can measure are changes, increases in sales in the MainStreet district, the resultant increase in gross receipts taxes that can occur from that, increases in cars and pedestrians, and boosts in our attendance at our events. And looking at some of the example actions and outputs in economic vitality, perhaps the organization works on distributing their market profile sheets, and they carry those, hand deliver those to 65 businesses. They might produce a business enhancement seminar on local customer targeting, and that helps support the strategy, and they could reach 25 businesses that way. They might provide in-store consulting to establish a social media program and work intensively with 5 businesses who are really interested in improving their media, their internet presence and their use of social media. Similarly, we have activities scoped out in each of the 4 other 3 points. Organization is conducting business visitations, engaging business owners in networking events, implementing a public relations campaign that highlights MainStreet business development goals. In design, tactical urbanism, a TIF district, facade squad, all of those activities are boosting the environment, the visual and physical environment of the district to better serve local customers, again, addressing strategy. And of course, lots of activities and promotion can help target that local customer base, reduce your leakage, and substitute imports. And some examples are your whole annual promotion package, improvements to your website, and maybe increasing some retail events or cash register ringing type events. Here's another economic development strategy, and again, this is a fabricated example, but the example is inspired by some of the economic opportunities and the economic strengths from Zuni Pueblo and their wonderful wealth of Native American arts that are produced in the community. So the strategy reads, increase the sales of locally crafted Native American arts to visitors and online customers by strengthening artists' market position. And this, of course, is an export. We're going to classify it in one of those 2 economic terms. So there's the strategy. Outcomes would be measured in similar ways to our previous strategy in terms of sales and gross receipts. But we'd also look at, or we would expect that the wholesale prices of Zuni art would increase as well as the retail prices. And the Zuni Pueblo would be very interested in artists family incomes increasing, and those could be measured by surveys as well as by checking periodically the census's measure of median household income. So all of those things would be expected to rise over time, and those are good, solid metrics to measure outcomes. And here would be a chart of some examples, again, under each of the 4 points. So there's lots of things that we do in our 4 points that address our community transformation strategy. Under economic vitality, a training program. Under organization, acquiring a grant that would help support a small business development coordinator who would run would help the executive director and other staff of the MainStreet program and other partners help people focus on economic development work in the community for an intensive 12-month period. In design, expanding art vendor space outside the visitor center and building additional tables, and counting those up to be 5 additional vendors that would be supported. In promotion, tackling the needed enhancements for the website with more customer education on native art and more celebration of artists, because it's been proven over and over again that sales are increased dramatically of art when folks get a sense of who the artist is and they feel that they've gotten to know the artist a little bit. So those are some examples in each of the 4 points. Let's take a further look at some further example strategy statements. And here's one: recruit new businesses to expand the business mix and capture more sales to both local and visitor markets. So if you've already classified that strategy as both an import substitution as well as an export strategy, then you now get an A in economics for today's course. Here's another one: rehabilitate our historic theaters for film and live performances to augment the community's entertainment offerings. So there's a strategy that focuses on a particular asset, collective asset, the historic theaters in the community. And just for fun, we can make up some other strategy statements that sort of capture the flair for statements that you could come up with as a community to reflect your own economic opportunities and constraints. First one is reusing a factory building to house a mercantile store and some housing, so rehabilitating a significant white elephant building for a mixed use. Second one is focusing on maintaining some of the key economic assets in your district, the city hall and county offices, and keeping that particular district's position, its market position, as a critical center for the community's civic activity. Next one is build the Main Street District's food destination niche by all sorts of things, boosting the existing restaurants and food choices, augmenting those food choices, and recruiting a white tablecloth restaurant because community surveys, community input sessions, economic analysis has shown that there's room for that there's market potential to support a more upscale restaurant in the community's mix of food offerings. Lastly, looking at a particular community asset again, the historic roundhouse in the community, rehabilitating it for a mixed-use development. So let's take a quick look at some outcomes. And outcomes are results, right? But while you're measuring outcomes, it's always good to look at outputs too. And are the things, all of the activities that you said you were going to do, and measuring those. And this is really important for funders and supporters and in grant applications because it helps, and grant tracking, because it helps show that you are doing what you said you did. You're performing and you're carrying out the tasks. You're accomplishing all of the important work that you said you would do in your action plan. So outputs are good too, but we're talking about outcomes. And another good buzzword for outcomes that people use a lot these days in our nonprofit sector, it's not just the for-profit sector that wants to have return on investment. So if City Hall is putting money into your program, if business and property owners are putting money into your program, if USDA is putting money into your program, or the state of New Mexico is putting money into your Main Street effort, everybody wants to see return on investment. What impact are you making for your community? How are you helping to transform your community in the ways you said you would in your community transformation strategy? And the ones we have to fall back on are increases in sales, gross receipts tax, customers, attendance, and incomes. And those are things that you would count, you would need to work on counting locally. And we at New Mexico Main Street have ideas for helping you set up tracking systems and counting systems for those. And then also, of course, all of your New Mexico Main Street reinvestment statistics that you turn in quarterly, and which are just every quarter amazing to me, the results that we're getting out there. I'm just compiling the third quarter of this calendar year right now, and I'm, as always, really struck by how many new businesses, net new businesses we're generating, how many jobs are being built, both for entrepreneurs, owners of stores, as well as their employees. How many buildings we're reclaiming and rehabilitating, putting back into use, how many new buildings are going up in our Main Street districts each quarter and each year, the public improvements up and down the street, the placemaking improvements that are so important to our formula, and how many hours, the sweat equity that our people are putting into it. So very, very impressive numbers we have. We got to use those to measure some of the outcomes of our strategy. So we're wondering if you have any questions. And one particular question that I have for all of you is, what economic development strategies are you currently using to guide your 4-point work? So whether you've done community visioning or not, you know, formal community visioning, you are de facto following economic development strategies, and so it's not too early at all to articulate those today and this week and tomorrow and next week. So can folks enter any questions on the chat if they want?
So they could use the question box.
There's a question box, sorry. Okay, we have a question, and the question is, how can you attract new businesses when the local population is too poor to support them? And we have another question, how long does the community visioning take? Should you schedule it for 1 hour or more? Okay, the first question is about the local population is too poor to support them. Well, that's really too bad. If your community is too poor, then you'll need to look at what are their demands for goods and services. And lots of times our Main Street districts and our Main Street businesses try to focus too much on selling to the customers who they'd like to have rather than who the customers are right in their trade area. So for Henry's question, what you do when your population is too poor to support businesses, I'd recommend you do some market analysis, and we can help you with that. Give me a call and I'll help you with finding out some market data about your community and how to pick that apart a bit to come up with strategies about generating some business ideas that address the needs for goods and services of local residents. So how long does the community visioning take? Should you schedule it for an hour or more? It depends on, this really depends on the level of community visioning that your community has participated in the past several months. If the community has gone through a comprehensive downtown master plan process, then you probably wouldn't want to ask them to do really in-depth and long community visioning right away again for your Main Street program. You want to take the input that they've given recently and put that to work. So, you know, this question comes from Mary Libby Campbell in Harding County, which has demonstrated many times the ability to pull a lot of folks together across the county to come to meetings to envision the community's future. And one way that they do that is by offering good incentives for folks to come together by providing wonderful food, really amazing tastes of Harding County, along with prizes and entertainment. So those are some of the attractions to pull folks together for your community visioning. And I think as long as you facilitated it well, an hour's worth of community visioning is excellent. I think an hour's worth of formally structured conversation could be augmented by an additional open house time or casual time where people are able to network with each other, write down their thoughts and input on flip chart pages or butcher block paper or input cards or survey sheets, and they take that occasion as they've been brought together in that community room to do that in that space. But yeah, I mean, an hour or so is just about right, I would venture. You can get away with more time if you break your participants up into smaller groups and really, you know, involve them in that visioning and that leadership development of their community on particular details of your community economic development strategy. So you probably could schedule a 2-hour gathering that included 1 hour of group facilitated formal visioning process and input process complemented by the small group exercises. So doing that is a good formula, I think, for basic community input gathering facilitation. Do we have any other questions out there? Or more questions coming in? Okay.
If there's no more, then we'll just cut it off.
Okay, well, we'll give it another minute or so to see if any questions come in, but in absence of further questions at this time, we'd like to thank you for your participation. Thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks for listening to me. I love to have the mic. And then especially thanks for your patience at the beginning as we were working out our sound difficulties. But I guess we figured it out somehow. Although do not ask me to tell you how Daniel figured that out. But we were back up and running. So thanks for your time, everybody. Have a great day, and please tune into the next webinar when we get those coming. We're going to have a series just about every month, and we're going to lighten up that webinar load a little bit for the holidays, but watch us coming back strong with a monthly webinar in the new year. So thanks so much for participating.